Far out in the vast Pacific Ocean lies a tiny, unassuming coral atoll known as Funafuti. Before the chaos of World War II swept across the Pacific, Funafuti was little more than a remote cluster of islands surrounded by turquoise waters and dotted with dense coconut plantations. For Japan, it was inconsequential, a mere speck on the map, too small and unstable to merit attention. Yet this overlooked atoll would soon play a pivotal role in turning the tide of the Pacific War. The strategic potential of Funafuti was hidden in plain sight. Its location, roughly equidistant between Hawaii and the Solomon Islands, made it an ideal staging point for launching operations deeper into Japanese-held territory. But the challenges were enormous. The land itself was fragile, composed mostly of coral sand and narrow strips barely 400 meters wide in some places, with little natural shelter for ships or aircraft. It seemed almost impossible to establish a functional military base capable of supporting heavy bombers, let alone a full naval operation. When the U.S. Navy set its sights on Funafuti in late 1942, it was not just a mission, it was a test of ingenuity, endurance, and sheer determination. Military planners recognized that capturing and transforming this atoll could provide a crucial foothold in the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaigns. If successful, it would allow U.S. forces to strike Japanese positions, disrupt supply lines, and prepare the ground for future invasions. But the transforming a tiny coral atoll into a robust military base required overcoming obstacles that few had ever faced. At the time, Funafuti was sparsely populated, with only a handful of local inhabitants who subsisted on fishing and coconuts. The island was covered with dense vegetation, coconut palms growing in thick, tangled groves, making any construction effort extremely labor-intensive. The soil was loose and prone to shifting, unable to bear the weight of large machinery or aircraft without extensive reinforcement. On top of that, tropical storms and high tides threatened to wash away any progress overnight. Every plan had to account for the merciless forces of nature. Despite these daunting challenges, the U.S. Navy identified the solution in the form of its Seabees, the construction battalions, skilled engineers trained to build under fire and in impossible conditions. These men were not ordinary laborers, they were a hybrid of soldier and engineer, capable of clearing land, constructing roads, airstrips, and fuel depots, all while facing enemy threats and unpredictable weather. For the Seabees, Funafuti was their proving ground, a place where ordinary construction methods would fail and innovation would be the only path to success. The initial reconnaissance revealed just how fragile the atoll was. Engineers studied the coral reefs, tidal patterns, and soil stability. They realized that traditional concrete runways were impractical due to the lack of fresh water for mixing and the unstable substrate. Instead, they devised a plan to use crushed coral aggregate, a material that could be sourced locally, compacted to support aircraft, and combined with steel Marsden matting to create a durable surface capable of handling the weight of B-24 Liberators. This approach was unprecedented at the time, representing a leap in military engineering ingenuity. Even with a plan in hand, the human element was equally critical. Clearing the dense vegetation required relentless labor under the tropical sun. Soldiers faced swarms of mosquitoes, scorching heat, and the constant risk of injury from sharp coral and falling coconuts. Despite these hardships, morale remained high, fueled by the knowledge that their work could change the course of the war. Every cleared palm tree, every stabilized patch of ground brought Funafuti closer to becoming a linchpin in the Pacific campaign. By the time the first supplies and construction equipment arrived, the atoll began its transformation. Temporary camps were set up for the Seabees, complete with makeshift kitchens, workshops, and sleeping quarters. Heavy machinery struggled over the loose coral, sinking into the ground and requiring constant reinforcement. Yet, against all odds, the construction progressed.
Roads and foundations for fuel tanks began to take shape, signaling the first tangible steps toward a functional military base. Funafuti's strategic significance was not lost on military leadership. They knew that once an operational base was established, it could serve as a launch point for bombing missions against Japanese positions in the Gilbert Islands. Success at Funafuti would enable a chain reaction, facilitating subsequent attacks on Tarawa and other key islands. The vision was clear, but the path was treacherous, demanding a level of creativity and determination that few at the time could imagine. Even as the Seabees worked tirelessly, the atoll's natural beauty remained a silent witness to their efforts. Crystal-clear lagoons shimmered under the sun, white sand beaches stretched into the horizon, and palm trees swayed in the tropical breeze. Yet beneath this idyllic surface lay a battle of a different kind, a battle of time, nature, and the limits of human ingenuity. Every plan, every calculation, and every laborious effort had to contend with the environment's relentless unpredictability. By the end of the initial phase, Funafuti had begun its transformation from an ignored speck of land into a critical staging ground. Foundations were laid, materials stockpiled, and the first structures erected. What had once seemed impossible was now within reach, a testament to careful planning, human endurance, and a vision that extended beyond the immediate horizon. This was only the beginning. The tiny atoll that Japan had dismissed as insignificant was poised to become one of the most formidable obstacles they would face in the Pacific, all thanks to the ingenuity and resolve of the Seabees.
October 1942 marked the arrival of the U.S. Navy's construction battalions, better known as the Seabees, at Funafuti Atoll. These men were not ordinary soldiers. They were skilled engineers, carpenters, electricians, and laborers trained to build under extreme conditions, often in active war zones. Their mission was daunting: to turn a fragile, coral-based atoll into a fully operational air and naval base, capable of supporting heavy bombers, supply ships, and the logistical needs of a major Pacific campaign. The odds were stacked against them. The narrow strips of land were unstable, the tropical climate unforgiving, and the threat of enemy reconnaissance always looming. Yet the Seabees approached the challenge with a combination of meticulous planning and unyielding determination. Their first task was to clear the dense vegetation that covered the island. Coconut palms and scrub forests dominated the landscape, their roots tangled deep into the coral substrate. Felling trees was not simply a matter of swinging axes. Each tree had to be cut carefully to avoid damaging the fragile ground beneath, which could collapse under heavy equipment. The fallen timber was repurposed wherever possible, providing makeshift scaffolding, temporary bridges, and fuel for field kitchens. Even the smallest detail mattered, as the Seabees knew that every resource could mean the difference between success and failure in such a remote location. Logistics presented an equally formidable challenge. Funafuti had no port facilities capable of handling the influx of construction materials, vehicles, and supplies. Ships anchored offshore, and cargo had to be ferried to the island using landing craft, often against rough tides and shifting sands. Heavy equipment, including bulldozers, graders, and trucks, required constant maintenance, as the corrosive saltwater and sandy terrain took a toll on machinery. Fuel, cement, and steel had to be stockpiled strategically, with careful planning to prevent shortages that could stall construction for days or weeks. Every shipment was a small victory, each crate and drum moving the atoll closer to becoming operational. One of the most critical engineering challenges was stabilizing the coral substrate to support airstrips for B-24 Liberators and other heavy aircraft. Traditional runways made from concrete were not feasible due to the lack of fresh water and the unstable ground. The Seabees devised an innovative solution: crushed coral aggregate combined with steel Marsden matting. This combination allowed the runway to bear the immense weight of bombers while remaining flexible enough to withstand shifting tides and tropical storms.
Work crews labored in the sun, spreading, leveling, and compacting coral day after day, often under intense humidity and relentless heat. It was grueling, back-breaking work that required precision, stamina, and ingenuity. Safety was a constant concern. Sharp coral fragments tore through boots and clothing, and the tropical environment bred swarms of mosquitoes and other pests. Minor injuries could become dangerous if not treated promptly, yet medical facilities were rudimentary at best. Despite these challenges, the Seabees maintained morale through a combination of camaraderie, humor, and a shared sense of purpose. Each day of progress, whether a cleared grove, a leveled runway section, or the delivery of critical equipment, reinforced the belief that they could achieve what many had thought impossible. By mid-November, initial infrastructure began to take shape. Temporary barracks provided shelter for construction crews, while temporary workshops allowed for the repair of essential machinery. Roads cut through previously impenetrable vegetation, connecting supply depots to the emerging airstrip. Fuel storage facilities were laid out carefully to prevent contamination and ensure a steady flow of aviation gasoline and diesel. Every element of the construction plan was executed with military precision, as the Seabees understood that delays could compromise the entire campaign. The Seabees also had to consider future operational needs. Beyond the immediate task of building a runway, they prepared for the construction of naval piers, fuel tank farms, and command centers. Anticipating the arrival of larger vessels and additional troops, engineers designed flexible layouts that could be expanded as the base grew. It was not enough to meet today's requirements. Funafuti had to be ready for the intense operational demands of a Pacific theater campaign that would continue for months. One particularly harrowing moment occurred during a severe tropical storm that battered the atoll. High winds and torrential rains threatened to wash away newly laid coral, flood trenches, and topple temporary structures. Seabees worked through the night, reinforcing foundations, securing equipment, and salvaging materials. Their ability to adapt to sudden crises became a defining feature of the Funafuti operation. It was a stark reminder that in the Pacific, the environment could be as dangerous an enemy as any opposing force. As November turned into December, Funafuti slowly emerged as a functional military base. The runway began to take shape, temporary roads connected critical points, and basic facilities for personnel and equipment were established. For the first time, the Seabees could see the fruits of their labor. An atoll that had seemed inhospitable and impossible was now a hub of strategic potential. What had started as a remote and forgotten speck in the Pacific was rapidly transforming into a vital staging ground for the U.S. war effort. Through relentless effort, innovation, and sheer grit, the Seabees had turned a daunting challenge into an achievable reality. Their work at Funafuti not only enabled immediate operations, but also set a precedent for the construction of advanced bases under extreme conditions across the Pacific. The ingenuity demonstrated here would echo through every subsequent campaign, proving that victory in the Pacific depended as much on engineering prowess as it did on combat strategy. By the end of this initial phase, the Seabees had established more than just structures. They had created the foundation for a decisive U.S. presence in the Central Pacific. Funafuti was no longer ignored. It had become a symbol of American resourcefulness, a testament to what determination, skill, and innovation could achieve, and a forewarning to Japanese forces that even the smallest, most overlooked islands could be transformed into powerful instruments of war.
By late 1942, Funafuti Atoll was no longer just a remote dot in the Pacific. The Seabees had begun to lay the groundwork for what would become one of the most remarkable engineering feats of the war. The task ahead, however, was monumental. Constructing a fully operational air and naval base on a fragile coral atoll required not only manpower, but imagination, innovation, and an intimate understanding of the unforgiving environment. The challenges were unprecedented. Runways had to support B-24 Liberators, some of the largest bombers in the U.S. arsenal, on soil that could shift with every high tide. Fuel depots and naval facilities had to be secure and functional under tropical storms. Every project required a solution that balanced speed, safety, and sustainability. The first priority was the airstrip. Traditional concrete runways were impossible, not only because fresh water for mixing concrete was scarce, but also because the coral substrate was too unstable. The Seabees pioneered a method that would define Pacific Island construction for years to come. They crushed local coral to create an aggregate base, layering it and compacting it meticulously to form a stable foundation. On top of this, they laid steel Marsden matting, interlocking panels designed to distribute the weight of aircraft evenly. It was a delicate process. Each panel had to be aligned precisely, each layer of coral compacted to exact standards. A single misstep could compromise the entire runway. Meanwhile, fuel storage presented another set of engineering challenges. Aviation gasoline and diesel were essential for supporting bomber operations, yet storing flammable liquids on a tiny flood-prone island demanded ingenuity. The Seabees dug shallow trenches and reinforced them with sandbags and coral walls to prevent spills from spreading. Above ground, steel fuel tanks were anchored securely, designed to withstand both the corrosion of salt air and the battering of tropical storms. Fuel lines had to be carefully routed, ensuring that aircraft could be serviced quickly without risking disaster. Each calculation, each measurement reflected the meticulous planning that characterized every aspect of the Funafuti project. Construction was further complicated by the constant threat of the elements. Tropical storms frequently swept across the atoll, dumping torrential rain and driving winds strong enough to uproot partially built structures. The Seabees adapted by building temporary drainage channels, reinforcing foundations with additional coral and timber, and working in shifts around the clock to secure critical installations. Despite the harsh conditions, progress continued. Roads were cut through the dense vegetation, connecting key points of the base and allowing the smooth movement of men, machinery, and materials. Every cleared coconut grove, every stabilized patch of ground represented not just labor, but ingenuity in action. Heavy machinery was vital, but also a source of constant struggle. Bulldozers, graders, and trucks frequently sunk into the loose coral, requiring teams of men to pull and stabilize them. Repairs were performed in makeshift workshops, often with improvised tools. Even simple tasks like moving steel mats or positioning fuel drums demanded coordination and creativity. The Seabees' ability to improvise under pressure became a hallmark of the operation. When conventional methods failed, they adapted, often inventing entirely new solutions on the spot. The human element was just as critical as engineering. Morale and discipline had to be maintained under extreme conditions. Heat, humidity, insects, and relentless labor could easily wear down even the most seasoned personnel. Commanders implemented rotations, ensured basic medical care, and fostered a spirit of camaraderie that kept the teams functioning efficiently. The Seabees were living the definition of build under fire, even if enemy combat was not always immediate. Nature itself was the adversary, unpredictable and relentless, and the men learned quickly that innovation was as much a weapon as rifles or artillery. Naval facilities were constructed in tandem with the airstrip. Pier structures, docking areas, and supply depots were using the same principles of adaptive engineering. Coral and timber were used extensively, reinforced with steel where necessary. Each pier had to accommodate landing craft, small warships, and supply vessels, all while being resilient against tides, storms, and corrosion. The Seabees' designs emphasized flexibility, allowing the base to expand as operational needs grew. By the time the first ships arrived, Funafuti was ready to handle the logistical demands of a full-scale campaign. Clearing land for construction was another enormous undertaking. Dense coconut plantations had to be removed without destabilizing the ground. Trees were cut carefully and the timber repurposed for scaffolding, bracing and temporary structures. Stumps and roots were dug out or burned, and the soil was leveled and compacted. It was painstaking, back-breaking work, but essential for the stability of future installations. Every inch of land converted into usable space was a strategic gain, turning a narrow, fragile atoll into a functional staging ground for military operations. Even the airstrip itself required constant monitoring and maintenance. Once the initial layer of coral and steel mats was laid, it had to be leveled, compacted, and aligned with precise tolerances. Surveying equipment was used to ensure gradients and elevations met strict aviation standards. Drainage channels were incorporated to prevent flooding, and repairs were ongoing as the coral shifted under repeated use. By December, the runway was beginning to resemble a true military airfield, capable of supporting medium and heavy bombers in both takeoff and landing. The Seabees' achievements at Funafuti were not limited to technical innovation. They demonstrated an extraordinary ability to plan strategically. The layout of the base considered not just immediate needs, but future operations, anticipating expansions for additional fuel storage, barracks, and supply areas. Every structure was positioned to maximize efficiency, minimize vulnerability, and allow rapid adaptation to the demands of war. This forward-thinking approach set Funafuti apart from many other hastily constructed bases in the Pacific. By early 1943, Funafuti was no longer merely an atoll, it was a functioning military base. Runways could support B-24 bombers, fuel tanks supplied aviation and naval operations efficiently, and docks handled incoming ships efficiently. The transformation had been almost unimaginable 6 months prior. A tiny, unstable coral island had become a linchpin in the Pacific campaign, a testament to the Seabees' engineering skill, creativity, and relentless determination. It was clear that Funafuti would play a pivotal role in subsequent operations, proving that ingenuity in construction could be as decisive as courage on the battlefield. The story of Funafuti's transformation stands as one of the most remarkable examples of military engineering in history. It illustrates how careful planning, adaptive thinking, and human endurance can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. What Japan had dismissed as an inconsequential atoll was now a formidable base capable of supporting major operations across the Central Pacific. The impossible had been made possible not through sheer numbers or firepower alone, but through innovation, discipline, and the indomitable spirit of the Seabees.
By early 1943, Funafuti Atoll had been transformed from a remote, overlooked speck in the Pacific into a fully functional military base, and the stage was set for its first operational role. The Seabees' engineering marvels were no longer abstract achievements, they were critical instruments of war. With runways capable of supporting B-24 Liberators and naval facilities ready to supply ships and aircraft, Funafuti was now a launching point for offensive operations that would disrupt Japanese positions across the Gilbert Islands. Its transformation was about to be tested in combat, and the impact would be profound. The first bomber missions launched from Funafuti demonstrated the strategic value of the base. B-24s, heavily loaded with bombs, took off from the coral and steel runways and flew directly to Japanese-held islands, striking airfields, supply depots, and military installations. These early missions were not without risk. The atoll was still isolated, surrounded by thousands of miles of ocean, and any mechanical failure or enemy interception could prove catastrophic. Yet the base allowed for sustained bombing campaigns, extending the reach of American forces deeper into Japanese territory than ever before. Funafuti's strategic location amplified its significance. Positioned roughly midway between Hawaii and the Solomon Islands, it served as a critical refueling and staging point. Aircraft could operate further afield, ships could resupply and repair without returning to distant ports, and commanders had a forward base that enabled continuous operations. The base's existence effectively shortened the lines of supply and communication for the U.S. Navy and Army Air Forces, creating a logistical advantage that Japan could not easily counter. The Seabees' foresight in constructing not just a runway, but a comprehensive operational hub proved invaluable. Fuel tanks, maintenance workshops, and supply depots allowed aircraft to turn around quickly and strike multiple targets in rapid succession. Naval piers enabled landing craft and supply ships to offload essential materials efficiently, keeping the operational tempo high. Each component of the base, meticulously planned and executed, contributed directly to the effectiveness of the first strikes against the Gilbert Islands. One of the most significant early operations was the preparation for the Tarawa campaign. Funafuti became the staging ground for bombing raids designed to weaken Japanese defenses ahead of amphibious assaults. The base allowed U.S. forces to hit enemy fortifications, disrupt supply lines, and gather critical intelligence. The impact was immediate and tangible. Japanese positions were destabilized, their ability to respond to amphibious landings was impaired, and American forces gained a decisive advantage even before the first boots hit the beaches. The transformation of Funafuti from an empty atoll to a hub of strategic operations was now directly influencing the course of the war. Funafuti also served as a proving ground for operational coordination. Pilots, navigators, engineers, and ground crews learned to work in concert under challenging conditions. Airstrip operations required precise timing to manage takeoffs and landings, fueling, and maintenance. Naval operations demanded coordination to offload supplies, repair ships, and support ongoing missions. The lessons learned at Funafuti would be applied to other forward bases across the Pacific, establishing a model for operational efficiency under extreme conditions. The psychological impact of Funafuti's emergence was also significant. For Japanese commanders, the atoll had once been an inconsequential dot on the map. Now, it represented a forward base from which American bombers could strike at will. The atoll's transformation undermined Japanese assumptions about which locations were safe from attack, and demonstrated that even tiny, previously ignored islands could become instruments of strategic dominance. The atoll had gone from obscurity to prominence, embodying the principle that control of terrain, combined with innovation and effective logistics, could dramatically alter the balance of power. On the ground, the human dimension of the base's operations was equally remarkable. Seabees and military personnel continued to work tirelessly, maintaining the airstrips, fuel supplies, and docking facilities even as aircraft and ships operated around the clock. Tropical storms, shifting coral, and the harsh environment demanded constant vigilance and adaptation. Every successful mission, every safe landing and takeoff was a testament to their skill and dedication. The base was not static. It was a dynamic, living operation that required continuous management, repair, and innovation. Funafuti's role extended beyond immediate combat operations. It became a model for the construction of future forward bases, demonstrating that remote, difficult-to-access islands could be transformed into fully operational hubs capable of supporting complex military campaigns. Lessons learned in logistics, engineering, and operational coordination at Funafuti informed planning for subsequent bases in the Marshall Islands, the Marianas, and beyond. In essence, the atoll became a laboratory for the Pacific Campaign, where engineers and commanders honed strategies that would be replicated across the theater. By mid-1943, the cumulative effect of Funafuti's operations was clear. U.S. forces could sustain offensive operations over extended distances, striking at Japanese-held islands with unprecedented efficiency. Funafuti had become more than a base. It was a symbol of strategic ingenuity, a testament to how engineering excellence could amplify military power. The Seabees' work had ensured that what had been a tiny, overlooked atoll now played a central role in shaping the Pacific War. The story of Funafuti during this period illustrates a crucial principle of warfare. Control of terrain, combined with innovation and effective logistics, can dramatically alter the balance of power. The atoll's transformation enabled operations that would have been impossible without it, proving that victory in the Pacific depended not just on firepower or numbers, but on the ability to create and sustain forward operating bases in the most challenging environments. Funafuti's success directly contributed to subsequent victories in the Gilbert and Marshall Islands, setting the stage for the relentless push toward Japan's inner defensive perimeter. Funafuti Atoll's emergence as a functional and strategic military hub demonstrated how vision, planning, and determination could overcome environmental limitations. The island that Japan had ignored became a vital link in the chain of operations across the Pacific. From launching the first bomber strikes against enemy positions to supporting amphibious assaults, Funafuti played a decisive role in turning strategic ideas into tangible results on the battlefield. Its story is a testament to the ingenuity of the Seabees and the critical role that engineering and logistics played in the broader context of the war. As operations continued, the base continued to evolve. Each new mission tested its capabilities. Each challenge reinforced the lessons of adaptive construction and operational coordination. Funafuti had become more than a staging ground. It was a proving ground where the limits of human ingenuity, endurance, and military strategy were continually pushed. The atoll had gone from obscurity to a pivotal player in the Pacific War, demonstrating that even the smallest, most fragile islands could shape the course of history when transformed with skill, determination, and vision.
Funafuti Atoll had played a decisive role in the Pacific Campaign, but its story extends far beyond the immediate victories of 1943. By the time the Seabees completed their work, the tiny coral island had become a testament to human ingenuity, determination, and the transformative power of engineering. Its impact on the war, on military strategy, and on the legacy of the U.S. Navy's construction battalions would resonate long after the final bomber took off or the last ship departed. The lessons learned at Funafuti exemplify how innovation, vision, and adaptability can change the course of history, even from the most unlikely of places. Funafuti demonstrated the critical link between engineering and combat success. Before the Seabees' intervention, the atoll was considered almost worthless, too small, too fragile, and too remote to matter. Japan had ignored it entirely, assuming it would play no role in strategic operations. Yet through ingenuity and tireless effort, the United States turned it into a hub capable of launching heavy bombers, supplying naval operations, and staging amphibious campaigns. The atoll's transformation proved that control of key terrain and the ability to exploit it can be as decisive as any fleet or army in determining the outcome of war. The Seabees' methods at Funafuti set a precedent for the rest of the Pacific Campaign. Their use of crushed coral for runway foundations, steel Marsden matting to support heavy aircraft, and adaptive construction techniques became standard practice on forward bases throughout the theater. Every atoll, every small island captured by U.S. forces could now be rapidly transformed into a functional airfield and supply hub. The lessons learned at Funafuti informed operations in the Marshalls, the Marianas, and ultimately closer to Japan itself. Engineers and commanders carried these innovations forward, applying what had been tested under harsh conditions to even more ambitious projects. The human element of Funafuti's legacy is equally remarkable. The Seabees embodied a philosophy of resilience and resourcefulness that went far beyond technical skill. They worked under extreme heat, torrential rains, and relentless tropical storms, often facing injuries, equipment failures, and logistical shortages. Despite these challenges, they maintained morale and discipline, constantly innovating to overcome obstacles.
Their ability to adapt, to improvise, and to work together under pressure was a model for military operations across the Pacific. Funafuti stands as a monument to their courage, skill, and creativity, a reminder that the most effective tools of war are often the minds and hands of those who can turn adversity into achievement. Strategically, Funafuti's success had ripple effects throughout the Pacific. Its runways allowed B-24 Liberators to reach Japanese positions that had previously been beyond effective range. Its docks and supply depots enabled amphibious operations that would become the hallmark of the island-hopping campaign. The ability to maintain continuous operations from a remote atoll demonstrated the importance of forward bases in projecting power across vast distances. In effect, Funafuti redefined what was possible in the Pacific, showing that even the smallest islands could exert outsized influence on the conduct of war. The environmental challenges of Funafuti also left a lasting impression on military engineering. The atoll was a fragile, shifting landscape of coral sand, prone to flooding and erosion, with little natural protection. Constructing a base that could withstand tropical storms, shifting tides, and the constant pressure of military operations required innovative solutions. Coral foundations, reinforced matting, drainage systems, and adaptive construction techniques became blueprints for all future island bases. The experience at Funafuti demonstrated that success in the Pacific depended not just on brute force, but on understanding and manipulating the environment to strategic advantage. Beyond its technical and strategic achievements, Funafuti had a symbolic significance. It transformed an overlooked, almost forgotten atoll into a linchpin of American military power. For Japanese commanders, it was a shock. A place they had dismissed as irrelevant was now a base from which U.S. bombers and ships could strike with impunity. The atoll became a warning that no territory was too small to be ignored, no environment too hostile to be conquered, and no challenge too great for ingenuity, determination, and careful planning. Funafuti embodied the principle that victory often depends as much on creativity and preparation as on firepower and manpower. The lessons of Funafuti extend far beyond the confines of World War II. In modern military strategy, logistics, and engineering, the atoll serves as an example of what can be achieved with foresight, adaptive thinking, and determination. It shows that the ability to construct, maintain, and operate forward bases in austere environments can dramatically shape operational success. The principles demonstrated at Funafuti, innovative use of local materials, adaptive design, anticipation of future needs, and relentless human effort, remain relevant to contemporary military and engineering projects. Even today, historians and military engineers study Funafuti to understand the interplay between environment, logistics, and operational planning. The atoll represents a case study in how careful preparation, technical innovation, and disciplined execution can transform a seemingly insignificant location into a strategic asset. Its story continues to inspire those who face complex challenges, showing that no obstacle is insurmountable when creativity, skill, and determination are applied. Funafuti's enduring legacy is also a testament to the Seabees themselves. Their motto, "We build, we fight," was realized in full at this tiny atoll. They not only built a base under extreme conditions, but ensured that it could support offensive operations that directly contributed to victories in the Gilbert Islands, Tarawa, and beyond. Their ingenuity and perseverance transformed both the physical landscape and the course of military operations, leaving a lasting imprint on the history of warfare. In the end, Funafuti Atoll illustrates a timeless lesson. Success often depends on the ability to turn challenges into opportunities. A remote, fragile, and overlooked island became a hub of innovation, a critical asset in one of the largest military theaters in history. Its transformation demonstrates that victory is not only won in combat, but also forged through the application of intelligence, creativity, and unyielding effort. The atoll's story remains a compelling reminder that even the smallest places, when combined with human ingenuity, can have an enormous impact on history. Funafuti's legacy is multifaceted. It is a story of engineering triumph, operational innovation, and human endurance. It is a lesson in logistics and strategic foresight. It is a reminder that creativity and determination can overcome even the harshest environments. The atoll may have been small, but the imprint it left on the Pacific Campaign and on the principles of modern military engineering is immeasurable. Through the vision and effort of the Seabees, a tiny coral island became a cornerstone of victory, proving that ingenuity can turn the impossible into reality.